and his willingness to step in and really kind of show up for students and kind of the community, regardless of kind of the level of gratitude he's going to receive in return. So I was really impressed by that and really thankful that you're able to join us again here today. So thanks for joining us.
I want to apologize that the mute was still on. You know, I don't know how many years we've been doing Zoom, but there's still always technical issues. So I'd like to close this presentation. And I don't know. Okay, now we're going to share screen. Here we go. And I'll let you take it over from there.
All right, so for people online, you didn't miss anything. So it's always, I always sound better when other people describe my career. So I was flattered. Again, thank you so much for having me here. You know, I enjoy teaching as well. Just my practice is so demanding, especially international practice, that I had to stop teaching. But whenever there's opportunity to engage with the students, I always say yes. So Mackenzie, thanks for inviting me again. And thanks, Gina, for organizing this whole thing so thoughtfully, and Boa for its generosity. I tend to prepare more material for any lecture. So let me know, give me a gesture if I'm, dragged along. And I'll try to feed as much as I can, but we can stop at 12:45, 12:50 to engage with some students, some questions. Because this is student dialogue or lecture, so it's not a typical academic or serious lecture. So I want you to engage with me. If you have questions, critique, or anything, feel free to interrupt or engage. And I remember back then when I was a student, I often, sat in the audience, having a more critical view. When other people were giving lecture, I would say, oh, I can do better than that. So I welcome that attitude. So if you think you can do better, I welcome that. I applause for that attitude. And you guys are the next the future generations of design. So I'm going to talk about, people can hear me, right? Okay, and see me. All right. I'm not going to check the chat in the next 45 minutes. So I'm going to talk about a marginalized edge effect in ecology, urban waterfront, and landscapes. So just a very quick, brief introduction of SASAKI. I know some of you might not be from landscape architecture background, either in planning or architecture, just in case. So SASAKI is a interdisciplinary practice across all design disciplines. So not only, even though we started as a landscape practice, and we have a deep bench across multiple disciplines, including planning, urban design, landscape architecture, civil engineering, ecology, architecture, interior design, graphic design, and sustainability, big data, etc. And we have about 365 professionals across the globe. And I myself is based in Boston office. So the map shows where we are. So Boston is the headquarters. We have over 300 people in one roof. And then we have a New York office. We have a Denver office, which is leading a project right now in Tucson. I'm going to show you a few slides in Tucson. And then also we have a team in Shanghai as well. Before COVID, I used to fly back and forth all the time across internet continents. But I haven't been able to do that for 3.5 years because of COVID. And all the blue dots represent our practice, our projects around the globe. And then last year, normally in the office, we do a year-end review. And last year, we had projects across 5 continents out of 7 in the world within that 1 year. And this is sort of a bragging, more like a business pitch. So we've won over 900 major awards, including the Firm of the Year from both ASL and APA. And we are the only firm that have been able to straddle those 2 disciplines being the best Firm of the Year. And our aim is to get that for AIA, from AIA as well. And we were nominated a few years ago. And even before sustainability was in the common design vocabulary, SASAKI had been practicing with sustainability or mindset in the center of our practice for decades. And that, the screen is showing up a list of the lead projects and sites, which is for outdoor space and landscape, and well and living building challenges, etc. And a really big part of my passion, as well as SASAKI's intellectual powerhouse, is SASAKI research. And on the board, I oversee SASAKI's various research efforts, initiatives. And this is from a couple of years ago, the biennial research publication. Everything is open source on our website if you're interested in reading more. So the research is not related to projects. It's completely curiosity driven, but it has been benefiting our practice, the overall ethos in the office tremendously. This was, I think McKinsey saw this at the CETA conference. So I organized a research fair. So we have a research fair every year to promote and just celebrate all kinds of investigations, curiosity, and formal funded research activities at the SASAKI. On the right, you see a bunch of us, we're lab coats. We're joking that we were either, we look either like, a bunch of chefs or butchers or scientists. On the left, Dennis Piper was the design chair before I took over. So he was entertaining with all the tools. So we're serious about analysis. So this is a picture from years ago on a project site. So even when topography or access is challenging, we still go there. So that was on the peak of the hill, just looking at the view shed, look at the whole watershed. So back then I still had long hair. So, and we continue to learn from nature. So I believe learning should be throughout your life. It doesn't have to be formal. We do formal research in the office, but before COVID, I used to organize team outing, camping trip every year. That's a really good way to bond with your teammates, and at the same time, just learn through hands-on experience, what nature is, why we want to protect that. Some of the junior team members were interested in the abstract concept like vernal pools, biodiversity. But once you push them in the wilderness and tell them how it feels, it's not just a terminology on paper. So that was midnight fishing, in Maine, and then we're fun. So as SASAKI, this is me and my partner Michael Grove, right outside of office, and he's the president-elect for LAF, Landscape Architecture Foundation. So you will see him in the professional context quite often for the next few years. So today we're going to talk about the edge. You guys might not be old enough to really know U2, or maybe. So it's funny that when you Google the edge, the edge came up more than any ecological context. I'm equally prepared to give a presentation about the edge's guitar effects, pedals, and guitar techniques. But no, so that's the real content. So edge effect is the tendency for increased variety and diversity at community junctions. So that's from 1950s by E.P. Odom and Richard Foreman in the 1995, the classic ecological textbook on mosaic. So if you see the diagrams, so if you pay attention in the environment, you see edges all the time. I mean, your eyes will capture the edge the most. When you define an object in your mind, the neurobiology will focus on motion and edges, by default. So on the diagram, you see, there are different kind of edge conditions. On the right, those are the soft boundary types. Those are more common in the natural world. Could it be a gradient? I don't know. You can imagine a marshland transitioning from water to land through, a soft gradient, or curvilinear, or convoluted, or curvy with tiny patches, like bubbles, puddles, or fractal, or fine textured. But on the left is the hard boundaries. In the natural world, it's really rare, except for like cliff or here and there, but it's really, really rare. But in the built world, hard boundaries are the most dominant type. And edge conditions are not only linear. So when you look at the edge conditions, you might see, okay, so that's the edge, certain buffer distance or depth is all I need to know, all I care in design. But no, actually you need to zoom out, especially as a designer. You need to look at the whole system, different shapes, different composition of the patches and the edge proportion dictate what kind of habitat, what kind of ecological health you are designing or you're advocating for. Because as designers, as planners, even a single stroke that you sketch on a paper eventually translated into reality. That's a new edge, right? That's something that people can see, people can perceive. Animals might be blocked by. And those shapes you can see, they might have similar looks, but the ecological properties or attributes are extremely different. So the interior habitat versus edge habitats are can be more different. For example, the linear longer patch versus the round oval patches, the dominant habitat types reverse. And sometimes people talk about canopy cover, talk about the quantitative property of open space or green space, ignoring the shapes or the spatial character. If you just look at this square, right? So on the left is a abstract, healthy, or contiguous patch of habitat with edge condition. If you look at the quantitative attributes of those two, they might be the same, area, type of species they support, but on the right one has higher edge proportion. And of course, it has more potential disturbance to the interior habitat. So if you look at the community composition, nutrient retention, etc., there is a nuance difference. So the shape and then the composition of edge conditions do matter. What you design, eventually what the landscape will function as an ecosystem. So on the right, you'll see either contiguous or fragmented. So the overall coverage might be the same. You see, parcel A and the parcel B have both like 35% of a green coverage, canopy coverage, but the integral ecological properties are just dramatically different. So on one side, you have a healthier, well-protected interior habitat. On the other side, you might be supporting a completely different type of wildlife. So if that's too abstract, let's look at just some of the mundane pictures that you see outside. If you go camping, these are all photos outside of Boston when I go hiking over the weekend. So this is an edge condition between meadow and forest, and that's where a lot of species, especially insects and birds, are most active because that's where their refuge is. So they can easily retreat into the woods, but at the same time they can come out to prey. They can see what's happening out in the world, but there's also a sense of protection behind them. And also the temperature and humidity, microclimate, everything changes throughout that gradient. So this is the convoluted or patches edge condition. So this Salt Marsh north of Boston is one of the most biodiverse and active ecosystem in the world. So Salt Marsh. So in urban conditions, an iconic urban edge condition cannot be more typical or than Central Park. It's very iconic, right? And it's highly desirable too. Human beings, I think that's a representation of wealth. So that means the edge of the Central Park, that dramatic contrast between urban and open space is where we desire. So when you design edge condition, we're not only considering wildlife or ecological perspective. So social attributes are driving our design motivation as well, right? So it depends on your client's demand. So often you do need to consider. So the edge condition is benefiting or counter benefiting human desire as well. Of course, there are some really bad examples. So the edge conditions or public assets are completely privatized or abused, right? So there's barely any edge condition in an ecological sense anymore. So this is a diagram that I did over 10 years ago. I was trying to illustrate in a really simple way to the client how to deal with your channelized water body. So when you talk to them with the ecological theory or riparian buffered with all the jargons, they don't get it. They think, that costs me money, that take me time. The straight channel works for me. At least I can foresee when it happens. When it floods, there's no uncertainty. So, but I showed those two motion, like, that's what you did in last decades. You stretched thin, shorten the waterway. So you're putting all the pressure downstream. And also when there's a flush flood, all the pressures within the channel, and your surrounding landscape is not doing anything or is bearing more risk. What we should do is a riparian buffer. You lengthen the water travel distance, slowing it down and having more interaction between water and the land. And that will nurture a healthier edge condition, creating more environment assets or recreational opportunities. So then they get it. At least they get it what I want to do. So this is a rendering based on that. If you skip that part and just show them this, they might not get it. They might, oh, what is that? That zigzaggy edge. What does it do? What's your design intention? So then, but by the time they saw this rendering, they got it. So they saw the intention, why we wanted to protect that marshland, why the edges are so irregular, contrast to their stereotypical urban water edge conditions. In their mind, they thought, okay, a recreational water body should have, manicured edge conditions, stairs, steps, people can go down, but this is completely different. So that was really good, interesting exploration of having the same vocabulary, talking to people without science background or intention. And then when you zoom in, the edge conditions can be more nuanced. So this is one of the soft edge conditions, wetland that we did in Shanghai. Right now it's under construction. So even within wetland, there are different types. This diagram shows you there are 5 different types of wetlands, even just within that small chunk. And each segment can support a different type of food web and ecosystem services as well. And then if you move up to the land, where the terrestrial ecosystem is dominant, water are those small patches, and then you start to focus on different type of ecosystem, different kind of wildlife, and different type of ecosystem services. And then you zoom in even further to see the vertical structure of a forest and what it does, what kind of complex forest structure can foster a more diverse, more robust ecosystem. So I'm going to use a few examples. I'm not going to talk about the design per se of these projects, more on the research, how research are tied back to practice, to support practice or learn lessons for future practice. So this was a 2018 National ASLA Award project. And most people in this profession by now should know of this project pretty well. So I'm not going to talk about the design aspirations, process. Just a quick introduction. The aspiration came from the mayor back then, and then we were commissioned to re-envision this phase 2 of the Chicago River Walk. And you all know that's a highly industrialized. How am I doing in terms of time? Okay, yeah. All right. So highly industrialized waterfront. And those bridges are iconic. At the same time, the entire waterfront was fragmented. No one could walk along the river more than 2 blocks. So you have to go up and down, cut across the bridge if the bridge is flat, and then go to the next one. So no one wanted to go down closer to the water, unless you're doing CrossFit exercise. So that was the stark image of Chicago River Walk. You saw cars, lanes of cars, mid-century design buildings, but waterfront didn't exist, or that edge condition is the stereotypical post-industrial hard edge that I say. In the natural world, you don't see any river with that kind of edge. So it never existed before human being, before industrialization. So this was the before construction condition. When we took over the project, you see, a short segment, you're blocked, you have to go back up to the street level. and then go down next one. But there was no purpose to go up and down because there was nothing happening. No ecology, no recreation, no views, just no social interaction. There was no retail or any commercial activities either. So it was not doing anything, anybody, any benefit. So this was after construction, after design. So those each segments were connected back together as a one continuous waterfront river walk. So this was under the bridge. So this is one of the most popular spots for people to take a selfie because that polished stainless steel is at 45 degrees. So kids really like taking selfies of the reflection and also seeing the reflection of the water. So this cannot be any more different than the historic post-industrial waterfront. The retail was really active, and in the summer, this becomes a really popular social gathering place. And the water activities were was reactivated as well. So not only attracting people from the street level, from the land, also attracting more activities to interact with from the river, on the river tour to the water edge. And then the vertical elevation was reduced, and of course really carefully. So I'm going to show you more images of why I'm saying that. So to create a perception that you're not being blocked away from water, so you're invited towards water. But safety has always been in our back of our mind. So, and as I said, so we were targeting not only activities or desire to come to water from the land side, we're also attracting people from the water side to come closer too. So before this project was completed, there were tours on architecture. So people didn't pay attention to what's happening along the river walk. They were just looking at the architecture. But right now, the river is a more holistic experience. You can see the activities at eye level, at river level, along the river walk, as well as architecture. So, and there are more recreational activities start to happen on the river. And then economically, that works really, really well. If you see the chart, the tax revenue or retail revenue, like rocketed after 2014, and the federal loan was calculated to be paid back in far in advance. So in short, overall, it's a very successful urban renewal project. But as I said, flooding is a reality. It looks sexy, it looks pretty, but occasionally it does happen. That was within a month when that phase of river walk opened. It was flooded right away, but everyone was like, "Oh no, are we okay?" But we said it's completely fine. It was all within our design vision. So we designed, calculated really carefully everything, all the levels, where we could bring down people closer to water, where the elevation was always above flooding. And also the construction, lighting, everything was designed to sustain inundation or flooding, and including planting as well. So on the right, that was within a month. But next morning, power wash it, back to business again. And edge conditions often, sometimes are not visible. So we're designing landscape features or spaces, places for people to explore. But at the same time, we have the responsibility as designers to design things that people might not be able to ever see or understand, but it's our responsibility too. So how to really sustain a healthier urban tree? So most people might think, okay, there's default product, you just put that in, it will grow for 10, 15 years, it dies, and then you replace. That's the common practice. But can we do better, right? So those were the trees as part of the river theater. And we have civil engineering practice as well. So those soil and even the structure are not typical. So the trees in the river theater can sustain longer, and they have a better irrigation from rainwater. All the structures are integrated underground in the river theater, so nobody can see, nobody need to understand, but they can benefit from really healthy, sustainable public realm. And then sometimes people criticize me for like being too idealistic, like ecology everywhere. I tend to just sell ecology everywhere as much as we can, but the reality is not. In Chicago River, you can't reintroduce the marsh because that urban edge, the flood line, everything is grandfathered in, and you can't say, hey, city, I need to reclaim 100 feet of your street back to the river. It will never happen. Probably in a movie, but it will never happen. But what can we do incrementally? So it might not change the overall picture, but at least it makes me feel better. And also, I think the educational value is tremendous. You gain more support, you gain more understanding from the public. I think that's, to me, is like even more important, that you gain more momentum from the public. So this was construction photo, I think in the springtime of the floating wetland. So we couldn't do anything beyond the river edge, but can we do floating wetland? We're not encroaching into the river or claiming the land, but we're creating a feature that is green, that is fun, that is dynamic, and that's seasonal. So, and as educational tool. So this is in May, fully initially installed plants on the right. 3 months later, they flush. And then, and each time people come back, they see a different river walk. So when the water level is high, they see plants are closer or they can touch. But during low water level, they can look down from overlook. And those pillars educated people, actually the river is not a static thing. Each time you come back, the marks show you where the river is. And then people start to come back to fish, even though I have the data that's still not healthy to catch those fish. But at least, people start to appreciate the recreational value or ecological value of the river, partially because the wetland. I'll explain why. Again, the invisible part of the park. So you see, kayaks start to interact with the activities on Riverwalk as well. There's a dialogue. So that's the invisible part. So when we designed this, the in-house ecologists start to do a literature review to understand the history of the river and the history of the aquatic biology or ecology. What kind of fishes used to live in the river, and why and when they disappeared, what kind of habitat they would require. Then we start to explore, if we can do a floating wetland, can we do even more? So that's what's under floating wetland, that is invisible. So people might not understand, might not care, but that did create more fish habitat that indirectly contributed to a healthier, bigger fish population. Then they can start to fish. So fish is like human beings or animals. They can't live in the parking lot. So the older Riverwalk wasn't like a stark wall, water. That was nothing. So if you're a fish, you feel naked, in the public. So it's the same. You need to create a more complex, nuanced habitat. Imagine fish. Fish need an underwater forest as well. So we created different structures, different hulas or underwater fish habitat manufactured. That's fine. And we were joking. So the easiest, the most like a getaway is that you throw your Christmas tree in the water. Actually, that works and that helps. But of course, we couldn't do that in Chicago. So those are really well calculated, manicured approaches. So that's construction. You see all those concepts, sketches, diagrams, 3D models became a reality and installed in the river. So on the right, you see the ropes, those ropes and knots. Those are the underwater fish habitat or underwater forest that fish can hide, can forage, and which will create more microclimate for zooplanktons, phytoplanktons as well. And SASAKI, we're a bunch of nerds. When the projects are done, we're not done. So we worked with the University of Michigan Graduate School of Environment and Sustainability. So 5 of them went out to Chicago Riverwalk and monitored, interviewed, and do a site survey and sampling of how the Riverwalk performs in terms socially or environmentally. So that's when, how long people occupied Riverwalk and which segment, which room they preferred. So as an ecologist, I like jetty the most, but I guess marina, the more commercial part is more popular. But still, that's important to know what the public demands and what we like.
Ooh.
And that's length of time when people stay at the Riverwalk. So these are just examples of the social study post-occupancy evaluation that we did at SASAKI. And then they use BLM, Bureau of Land Management, visual resource inventories evaluation approach to look at how people perceive the difference between and after. So it's not a quantitative, but it's a very effective way to evaluate visual perception of a building environment. And then they did a hard science sediment sampling, fish habitat, microorganism sampling, and see how much difference the project made. Of course, I'm not fantasizing that one segment of Riverwalk can save the river. No, I expect that. So the sediment still has unhealthy concentration of decades or maybe hundreds of years of pollution. So still the river is not the healthiest or still not healthy. And a microorganism is not in a condition that can really sustain a healthy aquatic ecosystem either. So it's not there. But by interviewing over 600 people, we received over 600 survey returns. So generally, the people respond with a really positive attitude. They appreciated aesthetics and both terrestrial and floating wetland vegetation design. And to me, the biggest value is that people appreciate what we did, and they try, they show more interest in environmental benefits or how designers can contribute to potential environmental benefits. And overall, it's more educational purpose than significant ecological benefits. So we want to be candid, we want to be honest. So we're not a greenwashing and going out to say, hey, Chicago Riverwalk won award, we changed the science, we saved the river. No, that's not the case. That's never the case. But if everyone does this, eventually it will hit the pivotal point. You might change the bigger system. So the second one is not a design project per se. It's more of a research or exploration by SASAKI Foundation. So I'm on the trustee. Each year we organize community-driven research and we give out grants. And then we provide resources in the office, our model shop, 3D printing, and the 300 plus designers. So we organize office-wide charrette to help and empower community members to design. This is different from SASAKI internal research. It's not, we don't do design. We don't, take over and draw something, give it to the community. No, we're really, really deliberate and really careful. Say, this is community-driven design. We provide our expertise, whatever they need. So we do charrette, we provide input, but the outcomes are from them. So this was in 2018, one of the grantees, Charles River floating wetland. And this was the board out after one day of charrette. I was leading that team. So we visualize, conceptualize what that floating wetland could be, and what it could do. So this is all theoretical. So back then it was all on paper, based on the history, based on the urban condition, based on the challenges of the river, and that was all theory. And then we start to socialize it. See if we can make this happen. We combine funding from SASAKI Foundation as well as all sorts of other academic and nonprofit funding sources. Maybe we can make this happen. Realize it. So those were exploration of different shapes, different composition of this wetland could be. Of course, it's not a one piece, right? It's composed with different modules. And those were just explorations. And then we start to help the team to think about planting strategies. What kind of plants can survive will benefit from if we're benefiting a floating wetland that doesn't look like a bare floating piece of dirt. So no, long story short, I think it was a year later, they didn't make it happen. So it was a combined effort from a lot of organizations, and the leading investigator was a PhD student at Northeastern University. So this was the installation day in the spring. So we put the Chicago Riverwalk team on the charrette as well. So they brought a lot of hands-on experience. They knew the material, the floating metrics, and the longevity of the material, all the how to anchor the floating wetlands, and otherwise it would be blown into the Atlantic Ocean. So there were a lot of engineers actually thinking behind it. So it's an odd shape, but it was ready to be launched. And that hole in the middle, that was my, I think it's a good idea. So I was thinking, so with the floating wetland, how do you know how well it performs or functions? So that window actually is a control. To me, it's a control. So that's the extreme, the maximum level of the wetland performance. If you sample from that window, you are more protected. You're different from open water in Charles River. So that provided a really good control data set.
About 5 minutes.
All right. Okay. So I was dragged to in the middle of the river, and then boom, pandemic happened. COVID happened. So no one was on the street in Cambridge. So this is Max, the PhD student. He was the happiest person in 2020. Everyone was stuck at home. He was kayaking, going to the floating wetland, sampling water, counting zooplankton every day. So he was the happiest person in 2020. And so that's a close shot of the roots start to establish. And that was his job, to bring water back to the lab to count phytoplankton and zooplankton population. And then he got interns, volunteer undergrad as well. Who wouldn't, right? In pandemic, to come out on the river. So yes, they were sampling in that window, in that control window, and right is from a micro shot of the zooplankton. So now it becomes a public interest. Everyone, if you take public transit, so the train, the red line goes on top of that. That's where I go to work every day. So in the summer, I see wetland every day. I observe almost like my child. In the winter, it's stored in MIT Boeing house. So it's not permanent, it's seasonal. So I think either last week or next week, they need to just put it out again. So it's been multiple years, and there has been a lot of discussion, public interest. So again, this is not going to save Charles River or change the water quality overnight, but the public interest, public understanding, public support are just tremendous. I may not have enough time, but I'm going to just show you quickly what this is about. So this was 2020 SLA National Urban Design Award. It was a completed project about 200 acres of public park. So a lot of bold moves from original fragmented urban parcels to 21,000 urban trees. And visually it looks great. Wetland and the canal looks healthier. But again, the nerdy side crept in again. We want to know really how it performs. If it really did what we claimed or what we hypothesized when doing design. So we convinced the city to give up multiple intersections to make the park more contiguous. And then we recreated riparian buffers along the canals. That was before construction. That was after construction. And then wildlife start to come back. So that was egret. And then people start fishing again. And then we collaborated with the local university in Shanghai as a regional regional ecology lab. And then the graduate student took equipment to the site monthly for 14 months. And on the top was illustrated plan. On the bottom was aerial photos. Pretty much that's the same. And we picked four sampling sites. 1, 2, 3, those are upstream canal, one canal going from upstream, downstream, receiving water from the city as well, like a large area that we couldn't control. Could be industrial output, could be combined sewage, stormwater. But number 4 was a design experiment. In the design phase, we cut it. So it's, normally you would think, connectivity is what you want to keep, right? Hydrologically, circulation is best, but probably not always. It really depends on the context. So we we isolated the small water body. It becomes, we call it lotus pond. And then it turned out, so if you see 1, 2, 3, right? So we receive dirty water from the city. It travels through the park. We discharge it into a lake where the public library is. And then 4 was sort of the control, similar to that wetland, hole idea, window idea. So we cut it. And this is where you could really measure if you have a fully controlled, almost like a vacuum, lab condition. What are your design? What are your wetland conform in terms, ecology? So, and then this was a part of the SASAKI research grant. I won that. So then I showed this too. I didn't see that, it was from the movie. So, yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, remember the sequence, right? So these are the hard data. So COD, BOD, those are just chemical oxygen demand. So they measures how much oxygen you would require to decompose organic waste in your water. So they measures different aspects of pollution. But again, overall, those metrics indicate the water quality. And nitrogen, phosphorus, you should know that as well, the most typical urban water pollutants. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So then, you see incrementally decreasing. So 1 through 3 means how the park is infiltrating, cleansing urban water. Number 4 is the control, that everything is isolated system. Number 4 performs the best. That means when you design as well, it performs to its full potential without external disturbances. The urban constructed wetland works really, really well. So these are the raw data. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it can remove up to 66% of nitrogen and 97% of phosphorus. So those are the most challenging urban pollutants everywhere throughout the world. So those are the post-construction photos, and I'm going to skip the next one, but I'm going to show you a teaser of what's happening in Tucson. So we are, our Denver office is redesigning your Reed Park in downtown, and keep your eyes on it, and it will transform the park. And then on the left, you see what's there, the existing condition. On the right is the vision, and you also see, the river ecology will be improved, and the stormwater and the extreme heat are two really important focuses the design team took on, and the wildlife, of course. So that's a quick rendering. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
We have about 5 or 6 minutes for questions.
I was just wondering, since you work across so many other disciplines, how does the program lead kind of just mash it all together, or kind of just bring all of these branches into just one product? Because a lot of the work that you presented seemed like it had just all of these stakeholders, all of these other fields, all these researchers. And how do you make sure that you as a project lead bring it together and package it all up into one thing, and make sure that all arms of your project are working on what they should be?
That's a great question. People online, I'll repeat that. So the question is that how we really integrated so many disciplines, so many different stakeholders, everyone's voice into one project to deliver the final product. So that's a good question, because at SASAKI, we're really proud of our integrated practice, whether it's it's called interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, or some of my friends call it anti-disciplinary. But overall, we don't believe in today's the magnitude of environmental challenges any single disciplines can take on these challenges. There's no way. I mean, I want you to keep in your mind, even though you're in your landscape architecture training, you need to know what you do not know, and reach out to collaborate with the allied professionals. So at SASAKI, almost never a project team is comprised with only one discipline. We always have people with different disciplines, with different background. That makes our practice stronger. And I think that's the only way. There's no way that we could learn everything. We could know everything. And the public and the client would require that as well. The stakeholders come in, they can attack your design from all directions. So you do need to be prepared and be educated enough to respond to all kinds of questions. They're asking, I want to more urban trees. Yeah, we can articulate the benefit and the challenges. And some people might say, I want to conflicting requests. And often on a project, you do get that from all directions. And I think, the answer is that's the only way you do. I mean, from now on, I don't think any single discipline can tackle the project at that scale, at that complexity.
I have a couple questions on chat.
Okay, so have you used resources like eBird? Oh yeah, of course. And in Naturalist to set a baseline and test your hypothesis about whether design interventions result in increased biodiversity abundance in certain taxa. I'm sure there's a well-represented eBird database for Reid Park, for instance. The second one is, there are ways for students, schools, and the residents in Tucson community to get involved with the Reid Park project. Yes, so we have used the eBirds because we work on projects all around the world. Often the citizen science like eBird is where we go to get a data that is not available. And so that's only one aspect of setting baseline data or a better understanding of a site that we're working on. At the same time, we intentionally more and more to have a more scientific baseline data collection before we start the design, at least before construction. So if you see that research fair, this was part of that effort. We're purchasing a full array of different scientific equipment. So when we do site analysis or site visit kickoff meetings, we ask the teams to check out those equipment to check the water quality, soil pH, as much as we can. So in the future, if the project will, we hope always to be implemented according to design, we can compare, we can check on ourselves whether what we claimed, what we hypothesized was valid, and then just overall to build that knowledge and share with the profession as well. And Reid Park, yes, there are pretty extensive public engagement activities. If you follow, I'm pretty sure it's on the website, and there might be more opportunities. And feel free to reach out. I can forward you to the design team, and they welcome your thoughts. So public engagement was a very one of the most core focuses of that project.
I have a question about your, I forgot what you call it, but I would call it a biopod that's floating in the Charles River.
Floating wetland.
How sustainable is that in terms of the plant materials, or do you have to, does it self-seed? Do you have to reseed it every year? Is there a lot of maintenance, or is it sort of a self-sustaining system?
I don't have the concrete answer, but it's not. It's a man-made structure, right? It's more of an experiment to see what a floating wetland can do. But in the nature, that kind of wetland doesn't exist. So it's constructed ecology. The material was all biodegradable. So if you don't care for it over time, it will eventually just dissipate and disappear. Plants, so far, I think they are seeding, self-sustained, and we're blocking birds because they might tip the balance of the nutrients. If they poop in that window, then that screw the data for that week. So far, planting are self-sustained, but I believe they do require certain level of maintenance. Again, it's a man-made structure.
Just to give a quick comment for that question about the wind park. That audience know, actually, we have been discussing with SASAKI. We have been working with the Tucson Parks Restoration Department also at the same time. So Shujian, Kirk, myself, and also Lyle give us some support. So it's the principal at SASAKI. We are looking at wind park as an example. We really have the Tucson Park and call that health. So that's something we kind of. So just I mean, actually, there are a few LA students worked on it. So they're interested in.
Awesome.
And I'm going to say, just knowing the city of Tucson, they're going to have, I'm sure, public process around from the city perspective.
Yes.
How much is the sites program part of SASAKI's work, and what occupations at SASAKI spend a large portion of their time working on sites work?
You mean landscape architecture practice, or so we have 3 large disciplinary buckets. That's how we organize our operations. So we have LACE, stands for landscape architecture and civil engineering and ecology. So that's one group. And then we have PUD, planning and urban design. And the third discipline is AI, architecture and interior design. So those are the 3 organizational groups, but fairly evenly distributed. So for LACE, including landscape architects, we have 118 people. So it's fairly well balanced in the office. So almost third, but it goes up and down, depends on the projects. The second part of the question is what kind of occupation or training?
Is it all landscape architects that are doing the sites work, or are there ecologists, or
No,
who's at the office?
It's always mixed. As I said, any project, whether it's urban planning, urban design, or landscape architecture, always. And now we're demanding teams to have at least ecology or ecologists in every single project. So when you kick off, we have a sustainability check-in meeting, and then we have a ecology component, and it's in high demand. We don't need to police in the teams. Often it's demand, like, I want an ecologist to be on my team, but they're spread so thin. So yeah, so all disciplines.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming.